Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Julie Sunne, and we are going to jump right in, Julie. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are. Tell us about your kids.
Yeah. As Courtney, as you said, my name is Julie Sunne, and I live in Northeast Iowa, and I was born and raised in Iowa, so spent my whole life here. I was raised on a dairy farm, and I had 5 siblings, and I had a really wonderful childhood. I was one of those people that were blessed with wonderful parents, and we had a playground in our backyard with the farm, and we learned how to work hard, that's for sure. But at the same time, I really enjoyed my childhood and loved that. I did grow up in the church. We attended church every Sunday, but it was a very much I knew God and I knew him as the sovereign Lord and I knew him as the creator, but I didn't really walk real close with him. And I didn't bring him into my daily life, I guess I would say. So I was a Sunday Christian. And that probably continued. I went to college, met my husband, and we ended up getting married. And a few years later, we were looking to start a family. And that's about the time we started our family, is pretty much where my journey with the Lord became real and desperate, I guess I would say. Because about that time when I got pregnant with our first child and ended up losing that baby within about 9 or 10 weeks of conception. And that spiraled me down into a very dark place in my life at that time. And because I think partly because I had not walked real close with the Lord, that was I didn't know him and I didn't know I had expectations about him and about how life should go that was not good for me and
Yeah.
was not good for dealing with a difficult circumstance. I became very despondent. I became just despairing of ever having a good life again, which looking back seems really silly. But in grief, you tell yourself silly things, and the enemy, Satan, just feeds right into that. And he will just continue to fill you with those lies. And it really took God to pretty shake me up a little bit in order to get me to focus again. I was very angry at him. I didn't really know if I wanted to walk with him and to be with him anymore, to be near him anymore, but just a really dark place. But he didn't leave me there. And it's really, it's strange to talk about it because I don't hear from the Lord a lot audibly or other ways,
Mhm.
but I did at this point. I was just laying in bed. I didn't want to really go on. I didn't know if life was worth going on. I was just very much in a darkness. And he reached into my dreams and he showed me my baby and she was beautiful and he gave me her name. I had not told anybody. I had decided she was a girl, felt like she was a girl, and I had named her, but I hadn't told anybody. I didn't even tell my husband. And sure enough, he gave her to me in the dream and said, here's Sarah. She's with me and she's fine. Now you need to get up and live. And it wasn't an audible thing, but it was very much in my spirit kind of deal. And that didn't automatically make me happy and jump up and down and joy, but it did break me out of the worst of that depression and allowed me to see that there's light and that the Lord, no matter how angry I was with him, he was not going to leave me there and he was going to be with me through it. And that was a really important step toward in my journey because it didn't all of a sudden have a wonderful life again. I had
Right.
very many ups and downs. My life continued to be a roller coaster of elation when we had a live baby and then just despair again when I lost another one. I ended up over an 8-year period having 4 live births and losing 5 babies through miscarriage.
Mm.
So it was very much a
Goodness.
roller coaster. Yeah, and we ended up having some disability in that our firstborn son was whisked away to the neonatal unit within just a few hours of his birth with some birth trauma that nobody really knows still what happened, but his arm was deformed and it still to this day is quite a bit shorter and not as functional as the other arm after a lot of intervention with him. But they didn't know if it was an infection that would kill him or what. So
Right.
that was
Right.
pretty traumatic. And then our third child, our only daughter, her third live birth, our only daughter, was born with a cleft palate. And for your listeners that don't know, a cleft palate is a hole in the roof of your mouth, basically. And hers was just in the soft palate, so you couldn't see it externally. And it took the doctor to tell us that she had it. Plus, she wasn't really able to nurse. And that began a series of symptoms we noticed as she grew. She quit breathing on us when she was 6 weeks old,
Mm.
and she wasn't meeting her milestones. I had 2 babies. I knew what that should look like, and she was not meeting them. And so we ended up hearing the um, developmental delay is what we would been told from the time she was about 6 or 7 months old. And
Now,
then
not to interrupt you, but the
yeah,
pregnancy had
no,
been
please
normal.
do.
Like you had no inkling
No,
at this
no.
point that something was potentially going to be wrong.
No, not really. We had because of my miscarriages, we did use a progesterone cream, so we were doing some therapy with that, but nothing that would indicate that anything. And she was born full size, full term. Yeah, there really wasn't anything. And even the cleft palate was such a minor blip that we're like, I remember calling my parents and saying, "She's here. We've got our little girl, and she's perfect except for a little hole in the roof of her mouth, and that can
Yeah.
be fixed." I distinctly remember telling people that, and so it unveiled very slowly her disability.
Mm.
We started getting early intervention by the time she was just a year, probably a year, well, probably about a year and a half to 2 years. We started intervention, early childhood stuff, just to try to help her maybe catch up and see what was going on. We started genetic testing, and they did at one point diagnose her with a syndrome, a genetic syndrome called facial syndrome, which was also known as Sprinson's, which is Dr. Sprinson was a name who was the doctor who first named this syndrome. And I just had a feeling after doing my own research, I like to dig into stuff and really
Hmm.
try to see for myself what's going on. And it just didn't seem to line up. So I emailed Dr. Sprinson. I got his email address in New York. He was doctoring in New York at the time. And surprisingly, he actually answered me. And he said, no, he said that she does right away. He said she does not have this syndrome. There's just no way. Her pictures don't even resemble a child with this syndrome. So that kind of left us without a roadmap, without really knowing. We had a few other suggestions that doctors would throw out there, like a type of dwarfism, things like that. Because she was little. Her hands are very small. Her feet are pretty little. She's got microcephaly, which basically means a small head. But then at the same time, they told me I had microcephaly. I have a small head too. So like,
Interesting.
yeah, I'm not sure that has anything to do with her syndrome, as it might just be because her mother is small. So we were left with really without a roadmap. And for a while, that really bothered me.
I'm
I
sure.
wanted to know what she had. I wanted to know what we could do to fix it. Just tell me and we'll do it. And of
Right,
course,
right. We can deal with it if we know what it is.
exactly,
And
exactly. We need the
yeah,
answers. And so I really began a quest of digging in deep and trying to find answers. And they weren't forthcoming. The genetic department could not help us. They really their tests did not show us anything really, except for they firmly believed it was a syndrome. And it's not unusual. I guess there's a huge percentage of disability that goes undiagnosed, at
mm,
least unnamed, I should say. And so that it wasn't a real surprise, but it was a real disappointment. And we ended up flying out to Massachusetts. We went through an autism program. Not that she was autistic, but she was somewhat withdrawn, and we wanted to help her give as many, progress as far as she could to her abilities.
yeah.
And so we pursued everything, and we went to this autism program, which was a wonderful program. And it really helped us, helped me for sure start to see her as the gift that she was and not try to separate out her disability from the person God made. They were one and the same. God made her
Mm.
the way she was. And it was just a validation of this is my daughter and she's beautiful and I can accept her the way she is. And so that was a beautiful journey, beautiful step in my journey to really embracing my daughter in all that
Mhm.
she is. And yeah, so that began
Now
that
let me
long journey.
Yeah, and I wanna jump in right there because you had
Mhm.
already experienced at this point was this the last pregnancy? Was she your last pregnancy?
No, she was our third child. So I had a miscarriage after her. And then I had our youngest son.
Okay.
Actually, I had two
So,
miscarriages after her before we had our youngest son.
okay. So at this stage of the game with her, you've had 3 miscarriages.
Mhm,
Your oldest son has been born with a deformity in one of his arms that
mhm.
was unexplainable. Were you aware of that during your pregnancy with
Oh,
him?
yes.
Okay. So
No,
that,
not with him.
yeah.
No, everything was going great. No, we had no
Okay,
idea.
so that was a surprise at birth, and
Mhm,
then
mhm,
now you've had this beautiful baby girl, and you're think everything's fine with the exception of the cleft palate, which is very common and very fixable.
right, it
And
is.
now she's a year old and you're realizing this is more serious than what we had thought. You talked about that first miscarriage and what a deep depression it threw you into
Mhm,
and
mhm,
how you really feel like that was a turning point as well for you
mhm.
in your faith. And so now you've been through some really difficult
Yeah.
things, these other miscarriages, this son with this disability, and now your daughter is facing this. How has your faith, let's start with how has it been shaken by these repetitive things that have happened with your children?
Oh, and it was really shaken. There was times I was face down in the dirt, just screaming at the Lord, honestly. I remember after the second miscarriage, and we had two beautiful baby boys, and I don't understand why you pick and choose. It didn't make sense to me at all. I couldn't understand in my mind, in my expectations, if I was a good person and did the things I needed to do and went to church and prayed to God. I just didn't understand. I had him pegged as someone who would honor that and just bless me for being such a good person. And
There.
I
I think
it
we've all
is
been there.
I
We've all
think
been there.
so.
I've done good things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
why are bad things happening when I've done
Yeah.
good things or I've done
Exactly.
good? And then
Exactly.
sometimes you see people who are not doing good things.
And
I'm like,
they seem to
you're
be
like,
blessed. I think expectations are dangerous
oh, of
because they really
course.
do set us up for failure. And so when
Mhm.
we expect God to act a certain way, he's God. We can't understand him and we shouldn't expect that we can. And I'm sure we'll get to that more. But yeah, so my faith was very shaken and I would be so angry with him and I'd try to run from him. And of course you can't outrun God or can't hide from him. And then he would just continue it, all I can look back now and say it was just his beautiful, quiet presence. And he just continued to woo me and to comfort my spirit and to show me the beauty of the children that I had, and including my daughter after she was born. And I think if it wouldn't have been for the miscarriages, I think it would have been far more difficult for me to handle the disabilities, the lifelong disabilities that Rachel has and now moving into caregiving with her, which is a whole new realm. She'll be 26 this summer, and her abilities are about like a 3-year-old. So she'll always need care. And to prepare me for that, I needed, I think, my faith shaken. I needed to wrestle with him like Jacob did in the Bible. I really needed to wrestle with my idea of who God is and who he really is. And so that was really important, but it wasn't easy and it still isn't. You still wonder why and why me, why her, why our family. I sometimes think I could serve you in so many ways, Lord, if I wasn't so tied down. Um, but this is the story that he's given me to steward and to steward well. And
Mhm.
that's my calling. And so, yeah, so it's not been an easy one, but through studying the word, through prayer, through really just, um, letting others in, and the more I share my story, the more I hear of the faithfulness of God in other people's lives too, and that really helps as well.
Mhm.
So I think it's important in community that we share and talk about that.
Mhm. And how has your faith been strengthened through these
Mhm.
years?
Mhm. Yeah, I think all of those things. I think that what has really helped, and that's where my new book that will be coming out in May, that's where that stemmed from. It was just really digging into finding out who God was. I needed to really know who he was because I needed to know that the promises, I used to think, okay, like I told you, I used to think if I did these things, then life would go pretty well. Yeah, a few hiccups, but not like death of baby hiccups, just a few other hiccups.
Mhm.
But when I really started to figure out, so he made these promises, abundant life, and he would always be with me. I didn't always feel him. Abundant life. Didn't seem like miscarriage and disability were very abundant or good for that matter. And and so I needed to figure out what that meant. So as I began to study God, as I began to study the word and see who God really is and really says he is, has his character, I was able to then realize that just because I can't see the fulfillment of those promises in my life today, I can trust who he is. So I can trust that he will fulfill those promises.
Mhm.
And that was a huge change in how I could view my life and my circumstances. Because I needed to know that the one making the promises was going to be faithful and trustworthy. And he can't be anything but. When you start studying the character of God, that's all of those attributes, all of the character of God work together in perfection. And they're not just one separate thing, and one doesn't sometimes become greater than another attribute of his. They all just work in perfect tandem so that we can trust this faithful God. He isn't
Mhm.
more loving one minute and less loving another minute. He isn't a God that is going to change on a whim. He doesn't change. And so we can trust, and he's a God that knows everything. So he knows he's already in our future before we ever get there. And so we can trust that he'll be there. Like, one of my big hangups is what's going to happen with my daughter when my husband and I are gone. It's a scary world out there. People do evil things to other people, and she
Mhm.
can't defend herself, nor can she tell people because she has very low verbal skills. So how is that going to work out? And I've had panic attacks over that.
I'm sure.
And I've had to surrender that. And part of that is knowing that God's already there, and knowing that he loves her more than I do, and that he has a plan for her life, and it is a good plan. I don't always see what the outcome of that's going to be, but because I know who he is now more than ever after studying for this book, I can trust him because I know that he'll fulfill those promises, and he'll fulfill those promises for me and for her. Sometimes it feels like he fulfills those promises for everybody else but yourself.
Yeah. Mhm.
But honestly, I come back to, if I could understand God, he's not a very big God, because I
Mhm.
don't have a very big mind.
Yeah. So I'm gonna circle back for a minute, and then I want us to jump into your book.
Sure.
When did you find did you ever get a diagnosis, and when did you ever find out this is what the future is going to look like for her? Or has it been just, let's just go with what's happening, and each
Yeah.
milestone or each roadblock that we face, we'll deal with it as it comes?
Yeah,
I
pretty
think
much.
with a specific diagnosis, this is
Yeah.
what's to be expected. This is the trajectory or the progression of a disease or whatever. Did you ever get those answers?
No, no, we never did. We pursued the genetic testing and the answers for quite some time. And finally, I had to really surrender that and let go of it. Because honestly, it wasn't really going to change the way we loved Rachel or cared for
Right.
Rachel. It got to a point where, health wise, she actually is pretty healthy. We're very blessed that way. So there wasn't that desperation for the health aspect of it. But it didn't seem like it would matter how we cared for her if we finally got a diagnosis. Of course, like, if a child has Down syndrome, that you might want to check their thyroid and things like that. So we did do some of those with counsel from our doctor. We've done a few extra tests that we might not do normally, just to see how is her thyroid doing, just in case this syndrome is affecting that, um, to try to be proactive. But I really had to come to an understanding that God knew the roadmap and I didn't need to, and that he would meet me when I needed him to meet me in that. So as things come up, we found out that she had and I'm not even be able to say it, but she had an artery that was the wrong way, and it was pushing against her throat, actually. So it was running behind her esophagus and pushing against her throat. And so we had to have that repaired. And it was just something we would not have ever known about, except for she was complaining about throat pain. And so we just dealt with it at that point. And God met us right there where I was at that point. When I needed him in the hospital, he was there with me in the hospital to strengthen me and to see her through. And so that's how we had to go, because there might now be, honestly, Courtney, we have not checked genetic testing now for probably a decade. And I don't know if we will because I don't know if it's necessary, but there may be. They may be able to actually diagnose her. Now, we did mention to our boys too. They did not get tested, but there is a possibility that it's some sort of a recessive trait that can get passed on. And that's up to them individually to decide. I think if they were girls, they might probably feel more strongly about maybe having some more genetic testing by them done. But as far as Rachel, I've really, and it's a good place to be to surrender that to the Lord. I found a lot more peace than continuing to just knock at that door that may never open,
Mhm.
to just let Him guide it and take it. And I've been okay with that. She continues to progress in little ways, but very tiny ways. She's, I think, more expressive than she has been, not necessarily verbally, but she gets her point across in a lot of ways. She's a very loving child, so it's easy to love her back. But she can also be stubborn, like most
Mhm.
people. So we deal with that too. But yeah, so we do not have a diagnosis. It's just, besides, she has what speech apraxia, which is a disconnect between what you want to say and what gets out, basically,
Mhm.
and intellectual disability is what it's now called. She has a moderate, they would classify it as moderate, whatever that means.
Mhm. It's interesting listening to you speak about living in the unknown because that's what
Mhm,
you've done for 26 years.
mhm.
You've lived in the unknown of what tomorrow's going to bring. And you're seeing a very physical aspect of that because it's your daughter and
Mhm.
it's these disabilities. But as a mom and you have other children that are not facing the same circumstances as Rachel, can't we all really though just identify with living in the unknown?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a real life version of that you're living, but in reality, as moms, we're all living in the unknown. We're
Oh,
as it doesn't even
absolutely.
not even moms, just as human beings, we're
As
living in
human
the unknown.
beings.
You don't know what
Yeah.
tomorrow is gonna bring, and I do speak specifically to moms, and it's interesting, last night, I was on Instagram, and somebody had made a post, and it said, "If you're 35 and older, leave advice. If you're younger than 35, ask for advice." And I thought it was a brilliant post. And so I went in to start reading some of those young moms and their worries. And one struck me because she said, "It doesn't matter what my daughter is doing. At each phase of her life, I am consumed by worry." And, as a mom of six, and we've had our fair share of trials, um, I mean, I get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it. And but we're all living in the unknown, and we can't
Yeah.
find any peace in that unknown if we don't know the one who loves us.
Absolutely.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know how else you would live it. I don't know how you would
I
do
don't
it.
either.
No, and I love, we do have 3 boys besides Rachel too, but I have to, we asked them at one point, and this is just, it's just a beautiful testament to how we really need to be seeing and accepting things in our lives. But I ask our boys, what would you want Rachel to be, so-called normal? What do you think? Was that something that you've ever wanted? And they looked at me so sweetly and they're like, "Mom, if she was normal, she wouldn't be Rachel, and she'd be a real pain for a sister." Which was so good. For one thing, she wouldn't be Rachel. She wouldn't be who God created her to be, which is such a beautiful insight. That's where the Lord says, "Come to me as a child," so accepting and of what He's doing in our lives. And to realize that, of course, sisters can be pains to their brothers.
Sure,
And
sure.
and not that she isn't anyway, but they accept it so much better from her because she's just so innocent in who she is, which is a beautiful aspect of her. And honestly, what it has just nurtured our family so much is her innocence and that beauty of that, her
Mm,
naivety, her unconditional love for people. She absolutely adores people, and it doesn't matter if they're stinky or down on their luck, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Where we judge, she just loves. And it's
mm,
such a wonderful thing. But if I was blind to the beauty of who God made her to be, I couldn't see that. I could have easily missed it all. And I'm so grateful that He didn't let me do that, that He didn't leave me to wallow in my self pity and my depression,
mhm.
but
And your
continued to,
expectations?
and my expectations. and just helped me get over that and through that and to know him better and to know that I can trust him. I don't understand. And I still fear the future. It's not like I'm all of a sudden, oh, it's okay. The Lord will
Yeah.
take care of it, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. No, I still struggle with that. And I'm sure I always will. What do we do? How long do we keep her home with us? Do we try to find a place that's beneficial? There's all kinds of questions. It's not an easy life. But God never promised. That is not a promise he ever made to us, was that we were going to have an easy life. He always promised he'd be there. And whether we see him or not, he's a faithful God. So he is there. We may not feel it. And partly it's because of our expectations we don't feel him. Because we
Right.
expect it to come across in a certain way. And that's, that's not him. He fulfills those promises. It's really us.
Right. I don't feel you, God, because you didn't do it my way.
Exactly. Exactly,
Mhm.
Courtney. Yeah.
Mhm. I love that your boys laugh at that. Like almost she is normal. She's normal to
Yeah,
us. And she's
exactly.
just the way she needs to be. That testimony right there of that's the way the Lord looks at us
Mhm.
and in all of
Mhm.
our flaws and disabilities because we all have
Absolutely.
them. And he's,
Absolutely.
I love you just the way you are,
Yeah.
which transitions me over to your book. Sometimes I
Mhm.
forget what inspired you to write this book. I love the title, of course. And maybe it's just hitting home for me because right now, with in the age that I'm like, how do I forget where my coffee cup is, what I was doing? And so I feel like I'm in a forgetful spot in my life.
Yeah.
I love it. Sometimes I forget. So tell me what inspired you to write
Yeah.
this book?
Yeah. It was basically thinking about Rachel in the future, and I was writing a blog post. I think it was a guest post for some, I can't remember which site right now. And I was writing that, and I was focusing on her future, and that's a really dangerous place for me to be because I was focusing way out on her future, and I was just lamenting the fact that I don't know what's gonna happen, and I'm concerned for that. And then it just flipped on me, and all of a sudden, like, I started preaching to myself. But sometimes I forget, Lord. So I just started praying to him. And sometimes I forget, Lord, that you're sovereign. You take care of everything. You have everything under control. Sometimes I forget that you're loving and you love Rachel far more than I do. Sometimes I forget that you're infinite and you're already there. And so I started listing a few of these attributes I did know. And it became a real comfort to me in that moment and it finished out the blog post. So that worked as well. But as I was thinking about that and about what other people need to hear, that really came across to me again. And not only did I need to know it, but I knew a lot of people, we need to know the one who makes those promises so that when we can't see the fulfillment of the promises, we can still trust that it's going to be there. And so I started doing a deep dive into the character of God. And I thought, honestly, the book was just gonna be 30 attributes, and then my publishers, "We would really like to make it a little bit more meatier. Could you do 60 attributes?" And I'm like, "God's infinite. Of course I can do 60." He has a lot of
Sure.
attributes, and then I just at about 40, I panicked, and like, how do you understand God? And that's probably the biggest takeaway I came was just how big and how amazing our God is. I struggled with some of those attributes because it's hard to put God into words. It's not that I struggled with who he was. It really was a beautiful tapestry of who God is, but it was hard for my little finite mind to understand this infinite God. And that's how it
Mhm.
should be because he's not
Yeah.
much of a God if I can understand him.
Mhm.
So it was a wonderful walk. And I think it really helps ground us in trusting him when we know a little bit more about him.
Mm. Mhm.
And
So when
that's
you were
really where the book
writing
was born.
yeah. So as a fellow author, and I've got a book sitting in a filing cabinet. That's a whole other story. But you listen when you're writing, whether it's blog posts or even this podcast, people will tell you, like, who are you writing to? Who's your audience? When you are writing these words, who do you envision you're writing them for? And so did you go there when you were writing this? Were you thinking, there's another mom out there who has a disabled child and she needs to read this? Or was it, but who is your audience? Who are you
Mm,
wanting to really reach
that's a
with
great
these
question.
words?
That's a great question. What really wasn't, I've always, and this is maybe my hang up, but I've always shied away from being classified in my writing in the special need realm of things. I think
Mhm.
maybe because I was so terrified of not only living it, but then writing it all the time and being there in every aspect of my life, I think
Yeah.
was part of
Mhm.
it. And so my writing mostly is really largely for women who, Christian women, because we need those reminders. Just because we know the Lord doesn't mean we really know the Lord and can trust the
Mhm.
Lord in our lives, because we constantly have that battle, that sin battle and that flesh battle. And so it's really written for women who are experiencing those unexpected issues, those unexpected seasons that can really floor us. And it can be as simple as my child has been sick for a week, has had the flu for a week, and I'm not getting anything done. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to have this whole week. And that can really send you, and there isn't, we don't need to be grading the difficulties in our life, because the difficulties for one person are are just as important as the difficulties for another person. They
Mhm.
hurt. They hurt that person, and you grieve those unexpected situations that, that are hurting you and that are harmful. And so I think yes, it's for those grandparents, those mothers, the women that are facing the real long, ongoing trials that never seem to end. But it's also for those of us dealing with some of those daily things, the baby that won't quit crying, that's colicky, the endless diapers you have to change when you're a young mom. And it seems like, what point am I doing all of this? Where's the glory in all of it? The glory is because we are glorifying God in what we do when we do it for him. And so it really is to strengthen our faith to trust God in all of the situations he gives us in everything. But yeah, primarily I was thinking of the long trials that people go through.
And I know that there are a lot of listeners that can relate to that, and it could be with a child with physical limitations,
Mhm.
emotional limitations, addictions. There's such a broad range of moms who feel overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
said, it could be the crying baby, it could
Mhm.
be the child with a disability or a serious medical condition. And so it is so easy to forget when we're in the moment,
Mhm.
when the situation is happening, because, and you have, I would venture to guess that you have experienced this when you're faced with a challenge with Rachel, and maybe you've had a season of calm, let's say. Things
Yeah.
are pretty level, right? We know what to expect with Rachel. We know that everything's going well. And then you have this peak in something that jars you. It's so easy for our body and for our minds to recall all the times before that didn't go real well.
Yeah.
And isn't it shocking? I'm saying this speaking from somebody who's on the front row of this. It sometimes shocks me at how quickly I forget.
Oh,
That's what I'm
absolutely.
trying to get to. I'm going
Oh.
around here, but it's like things seem calm. Then there something happens, and then all of a sudden, everything that happened in the past that was really hard and really difficult feels like it all comes flooding back in
Mhm.
to this peak moment,
Yeah.
and you remember all of that. You feel it physically, you feel it emotionally, you feel it spiritually,
Yeah.
and it's we all of a sudden have amnesia.
Oh, man, I don't know how many times in the last week I've had amnesia. I've forgotten. And that's, I think, what I really wanna get across is we do that all the time. It can be and for me, it's probably some of the smaller things. And I start just, "Oh, nothing's going right, and everything is awful." Once one little thing goes bad, everything is awful, and where is God in this? And it's so silly because we know better, but we just forget it in that moment. And that's where God's grace comes in and his mercy. And so we don't need to beat ourselves up. We just need to remind ourselves again of who he is and that he's still right there for us and he's still loving on us and his grace will see us through in that moment. Now, don't expect his grace for next week. Don't be That's where the projecting out in the future is so dangerous. Is God promises us grace for today, for this minute, for what we're walking through now. And that he'll light our path for the next step, not way down the road. And so we've got to quit trying to control our lives and realize that he is the one controlling our lives. And it's really freeing if we would just receive that, because all we have to do is take that next step. That's what we have to do. We don't have to figure it out. And he's got it figured out.
Yeah.
So it should be a very freeing place. But oh my goodness, yes, amnesia is, I forget all the time. I forget all the
Yeah.
time. And honestly, that's why I wrote it, because I need the reminder.
You need the reminder.
I
Yeah.
need the reminder every day. Yeah.
And you make such a good point. I think projecting the future,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the
Mm-hmm.
situation that you're in. And I'm gonna speak to young moms again. Um, you look at your little kid, your toddler, whatever, and you begin to create a future. You begin to
Mm-hmm.
see a future.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that you don't dream for your kids, right? And you don't hope for your kids and you don't have ideas of how lovely things can be. But I think that if you get lost in dream world, that you are then even more shocked when
Yeah.
things don't go the way you imagine. And like you said at the very beginning of this podcast, you were like, wait, God, why am I going through this? I've been a good person. I've been going to church all my life, raised by a good family. And would you say that not only was the miscarriage devastating because you lost a child, the very first one that sent you into a dark place, if I said, was it also so much about, was it a death of who you thought God was?
Oh, I really think so. But which was
Or
actually,
who you imagined him to be? Who
yeah,
you
who I
expected him
imagined
to be?
him,
Let
who
me
I expected him to be. And I think that was the best. That's so what I needed. So what I didn't want.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
but God knew. He knew exactly what it would take. I pride myself, which is probably not a good thing, at being a strong woman. And I can handle things. And I was raised to run with the boys and solve the problems and do the things. And so I couldn't solve that and I couldn't control it. And I think that, and I couldn't understand him. And I think he knew it. He knew I needed to have my whole expectations of who he was completely turned upside down in order for me to really, and oh boy, that was 30 some years ago now. And it's taken me this long to write a book about who he is because I wasn't ready and I had to experience the constant and repeated um, tearing down of my expectations to start finally saying, okay, I don't have this control. I am not in control and you are, and I am going to be okay with that because I know you love me and I know that what's going on 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years from now, and forever. That I don't have to worry about that, although I still worry because I am
Sure.
still here on earth and in flesh, but I can have the peace knowing that the Lord is the sovereign one, that it's on him and he's taken it and he's going to make it okay. And we may not ever see it in this life. And we have to learn how to be okay with that too, knowing that he's promised healing and wholeness and um, and perfection in our next life. And so all we have to do is really hold on for the ride.
Mhm.
And I think when we can do that's when we can really start seeing the beauty in the life he has given us. And that's the more I get to that point, the more I see the beauty in my daughter and who
Mhm.
she is and the situation that we're in. I don't always like the things where we don't have the flexibility of we're supposed to be empty nesters. Our youngest is 22 and married and we are supposed to be the empty nesters who can go out when someone calls, and we don't have that ability. And so it's not always easy. I don't always like it, and it's not always easy, but I can see beauty in it as well. And because I can trust the Lord that this is what he has in store for us and he's handling it.
Mhm.
And this is a
Mhm.
story he wants me to steward. And my job is to glorify him in it and to steward my story well, or the story he's writing through me well.
It's interesting as an outsider who doesn't, I didn't know you prior to us hopping on
Yeah.
this call. And of course, I don't know Rachel, but just listening to your wisdom and your faith and your confidence in who God is. And I feel like you learned so much of that through Rachel's life,
Mhm.
through Rachel's innocence, through Rachel's
Mhm.
naivety. She has no expectations of what her life can be like. She just is.
Mhm.
She just
Mhm.
exists in this beautiful space that God created
Yeah.
just for her. And man, if we could all just have just a tiny bit
Mhm.
of the freedom that I feel like Rachel feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to
It's
ask you a hard question,
okay. I'm
but it's
ready.
going to be harder than 60 attributes.
Oh
Okay.
no.
I'm
Oh
going
no.
against the publisher, and I didn't send you this ahead of time. So you're probably like, what? This is not in the script. Give me your top two favorite attributes.
Oh, that is so hard. That is so hard.
I know, because they're all fantastic, but
They
I hate to
are.
narrow it down.
They
But
are.
if you were like, Courtney, it's these
Mm.
two. When I think about the Lord, when I think about Rachel's life, when I think about all the hardship that we've been through, these two attributes of God always center me back into wholly who He is. Can you answer it?
I
I'll
will
give
you
you a
let me say
second.
3? Will you let me say 3?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Top three is
3.
even better.
Okay, I'll do 3. Okay, first of all, which is sometimes contrary to what people think, his sovereignty. His sovereignty has just really grounded me when I might be getting unmoored. And that's because, again, he's in charge of it all and I don't have to be. And I would have probably pushed against that way back when, and I'm sure I did. But to me now it's just one of the most beautiful attributes of his that he is sovereign and he has it all under control. The second one I would say would be his unchanging nature, his immutability is one of the most beautiful attributes because it means all the other ones we can trust all the other attributes of God because he isn't changing. He's like I said, he's not more loving one minute and less the other. I could not imagine if I had to and I'm saying we do need to have a healthy fear of our Lord, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. He's very worthy of our
Right.
respect, and he is a wrathful God, and he does thankful for Jesus Christ that as Christians we aren't going to receive that wrath, but it's still there. It's still a part of his character. So he is certainly someone to a God to fear and worship and respect. But he is the terror there would be is if I had to fear of doing something wrong that would tick him off.
Mm.
And that's not the God we have. Doesn't change. He doesn't act on a whim. And and I mess up all the time. So if all of a sudden I had to if I took this one wrong step, he was going to be ticked off and strike me right there, how what terror that would be. So that his immutability and just knowing he's constant. And so I can depend on that. And then the last one I have to mention is his that he's a victor. He's already got victory and he's won that for us. And through Jesus Christ, he's won that. And we know that we are going to be whole and perfect with him in heaven someday. And we won't have any more tears. My daughter loves it when in church or when we talk about the song where at Christmas where Jesus never cries. The baby Jesus didn't cry. It's probably not true. No tears. He cried. And it's just so beautiful. She just loves that we won't have any more tears in heaven. She just grabs onto that immediately. And so we have victory. This isn't all there is. Thank God this is not all there is. And so because he has victory, we have victory as well as his children. And but yeah, I would say those 3, even though I love so many others. But
Right. Right. Those are good.
in
Those
fact,
are
I really
good.
want to keep going. But
I know. I'm like, okay, how much time do we have? Just keep telling us.
yes.
Just keep telling us. So good. I appreciate you sharing your story. I know it's not an easy one, but there are other moms and women out there that need to hear. And you're such an example of steadfast faith, even in difficult circumstances. And I'm so glad that you wrote this book because we all forget. We all have spiritual amnesia. And I think this is going to be an incredible encouragement and tool to the listeners. I'm excited for it to come out. I can't read it. I need it. This whole hour, I needed more than I can tell you this week.
That's so sweet for you to say. Thank you so much. And that's why I wrote it.
Hmm.
We all need that encouragement. And
Hmm.
we all just need to know that the Lord is our anchor and we can trust him. We really
Yeah.
can.
I end every episode with asking, is there something you're praying for that we could join you in prayer? And do you have a verse that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, I would love for prayer for me to really walk in that surrender with the Lord and to not forget so often.
Hmm.
And that may be a cop out, but it's certainly true because it does. it is easy to compare and to look at other people's lives who are living a little more flexible life and to lament that. And I don't want to. I don't want to miss the beauty that God gave me in my life. And so that would be, I would love for those prayers. I would absolutely love for those prayers. And then you had asked for scripture. Is that where we're going
Yeah.
next? Is that what you said?
A verse that
I
you
almost forgot. You got me all choked up. Yeah, I absolutely love. And I suppose I don't know that I actually really ever grabbed a life verse, but if I did, this would probably be it. And I hope you don't mind. I'm going to read it because I don't want
No,
to get it
please.
wrong. And if I have a real problem, it's I don't memorize. So at least not for a long term. So I'm going to go ahead and read. It's from Jeremiah 17:7 and 8. And I absolutely love this verse. I love it in a couple different versions, but I'll tell you in a minute after I read it why I like certain versions over the others. The person who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence indeed is the Lord, is blessed. He will be like a tree planted by water. It sends its roots out toward a stream. It doesn't fear when heat comes, and its foliage remains green. It will not worry in a year of drought or cease producing fruit. And that again is from Jeremiah 17:7-8. And the reason I love that so much, especially the versions of the Bible that say, whose confidence isn't just in the Lord, but the confidence and our trust is the Lord. It's a big difference to trust in the Lord or to make him your trust, to trust the Lord, not just in him. I think there's a big difference. And when I make my confidence the Lord, then nothing can shake that because he can't be shaken. And then no matter what our circumstances are, we can be assured that we are going to bear fruit and we're going to grow in a way that he wants us to grow and produce and be vibrant in our lives, whatever he wants from that to be, whatever plan he has for us. So I absolutely love that verse and I keep coming back to it over and over.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your story. It's been a real blessing talking with you.
Oh, blessing has been mine, Courtney. Really a joy.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers. And in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.